Michaela Vernava for Nesson.com. I'm joined on the line by Gabe Feldman, professor at Tulane Law School, director of Tulane Sports Law Program, and NFL Network legal analyst. Gabe, I think it's safe to say you know a little bit about sports law. Am I right?
I've studied it a time or two. I may have taught a few classes. Yes.
All right. Well, we need to get your take then on federal appeals court decision to overturn Judge Richard Berman's ruling, the bombshell dropped on Patriots Nation yesterday. Were you surprised at this ruling?
I wasn't surprised primarily because at the oral argument a couple of months ago, this was clearly the way the judges were leaning. I think we all cautioned coming out of the courtroom that you can't read too much into the questioning, but they previewed their decision here, and this is exactly how it seemed like it was going to come down based on that day. Two judges in favor of upholding the suspension, and then one judge in dissent saying that the suspension should remain overturned. So not surprised given how things played out in court a couple months ago.
What is the significance that two judges now have ruled in favor of the NFL, but then one judge ruled in favor with Tom Brady, but that makes two because Judge Richard Berman also ruled in favor of Brady?
Unfortunately for Patriots fans, they got the two judges in the wrong order. They needed the majority of the Second Circuit, so it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things that they have a district court judge and one Court of Appeals judge. They needed two of those Court of Appeals judges to rule in their favor. So it doesn't mean anything other than if Tom Brady tries to appeal this to the full Second Circuit, he may be able to take some solace in the fact that not only did one judge dissent, but it was the chief judge of the Second Circuit, and he may be able to rally some momentum to try to get at least a majority of the other judges to rehear the case. So there is some silver lining for Tom Brady.
Now, can you explain what that process would be? It's 13 judges, and you need the majority of those judges if you were to go to the Second Circuit of Appeals?
Right, and really what we're talking about at this point is not whether Tom Brady would win on the merits. This is only about whether the Second Circuit would agree to hear the case at what's called en banc. And you need a majority of those judges to agree just to hear the case, and then they'd ask for briefing, and we in a sense start all over again in the appellate process, and then that full Second Circuit would make a decision, and then whoever loses that could, in theory, appeal all the way up to the Supreme Court. The problem from Tom Brady's perspective, although he does have legal options left, those legal options are relative long shots.
So the chances aren't looking good of either getting a majority in Second Circuit appeals. What about appealing to Supreme Court? Because they don't accept many of the cases, right?
No, both the full Second Circuit and the Supreme Court accept a very small percentage of cases that are appealed to them. And this is not, as much as this case means to people in New England and the NFL, this is not the type of case that the Supreme Court typically hears. There's no circuit split, at least as of yet. There's no overarching constitutional law issue. So, again, it's something that the Supreme Court could decide to hear. It's certainly a high-profile case, but the odds are against Tom Brady getting that case heard by the Supreme Court. And then, of course, even if it's heard, he's got to hope that the Supreme Court actually rules in his favor.
So what is your take on all of this? Because obviously Patriots fans and even just a lot of football fans, it seems like an infraction that's so minor and this has been blown way out of proportion. But what's in court and being ruled upon now isn't the deflated footballs. It's the NFLPA and their collective bargaining agreement, which they essentially signed over the right for Roger Goodell to punish them the way he sees fit. What do you think of the terminology in that whole agreement?
Well, I mean, I think you described it very accurately, that the league has argued from day one that the collective bargaining agreement, the Players Association, gives the commissioner broad discretion and final authority to discipline players for misconduct off of the field. But the Players Association response has always been there are limits to that authority, and hearings have to be fair, the evidence has to be fair, and this entire process lacked fundamental fairness. The district court agreed with the NFL Players Association. One circuit court judge agreed, but again, the majority of the Second Circuit said all of those issues are to be decided by the commissioner, and we have to give broad discretion to the commissioner. In this case, the commissioner did not abuse his discretion, did not exceed the scope of his authority, And the only opinion that matters, and it's because of the terms of the collective bargaining agreement and the deference afforded under federal law, the only opinion that matters is the commissioner. And even that federal district court judge's opinion didn't matter. And so ironically, the Second Circuit said it wasn't Roger Goodell who exceeded the scope of his authority. It was a district court judge who exceeded the scope of his authority by overruling the commission.
Very interesting. So when it's all said and done, do you think Tom Brady is sitting out 4 games at the beginning of this season? Or if he were to try to make an appeal, could it again be postponed another season?
Well, Tom Brady might ask for a stay, which would essentially put the suspension on hold while the appeals wind their way through the courts. It's not clear if the court would grant that. Again, those types of stays are relatively rarely granted. But to use the words from the Wells report that the Patriots fans have grown to hate, at this point at least, it's more probable than not that Tom Brady will for game suspension.
All right, Gabe Feldman, really appreciate your take. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.